Alright class, tonight remember you have to write your essay comparing how the cultural context of The Great Gatsby and The Scarlet Letter shapes the characters of the books. Your essay is due tomorrow, so make sure you get this turned in.
Oh my gosh, I'm never going to get this essay done.
Essay? What?
Yeah, we have to write an essay.
Over what?
The cultural context of The Scarlet Letter and The Great Gatsby.
I'm not doing that.
Oh, Tom.
Nathaniel Hawthorne? Scott Fitzgerald?
Yes?
Yeah?
And am I on a talk show?
Of course you are. You invited us here to talk about our books and their cultural context.
So, I'm like Oprah.
Oprah?
You want a car? You want a car? Just kidding. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to ask you guys a few questions, and this one's to you, Fitzgerald. What was your life like at the time that you wrote the book?
Well, when I wrote The Great Gatsby, I was striving for the American dream like many people were during the Roaring '20s. I was still struggling as a writer. The Great Gatsby didn't reach its fame and like popularity until later on in my career.
And Hawthorne, I noticed that you kind of mocked the Puritans and the Puritan religion. So, did any religious movements influence your writing?
Yeah, that's correct. I did talk about the Puritans a lot in my book, and although I didn't really live at the time of the Puritan movement when they were kind of almost coming to power as a religious group, I wrote about them because of my connection with my ancestors, how they followed this way of life and they were Puritans. And for this reason I sort of mocked it because I did not believe in the same fundamentals and ideals of religion as they did. So you probably did see it appear many times in my book, whether it was me talking about the culture that Hester was living in or Hester criticizing the culture herself. It did appear in my book, The Scarlet Letter, multiple times.
So for both of you guys, what are some common characteristics of the people in these time periods?
Some characteristics people showed during my time period in the Roaring '20s were greed. People were very greedy for money and striving for the American dream. Wealth was always on everyone's mind. People were very single-minded, and this led them to be selfish. I saw this throughout my life and my time period. I used this as a motif in the book.
Well, I kind of agree with you. In my book, I used kind of the characteristic of single-mindedness or focused on one thing in a way. Because the culture of the time period in which I wrote, many people of the Puritan society were very unforgiving of people such as Hester or Pearl that did not fit the social norms. And so this kind of single-mindedness or lack of ability to accept others of other feelings and other ideas or ideas about the society in which they're living in is definitely shown throughout my book. Another thing that I talked about is how unforgiving they are in terms of punishment, where if somebody does something wrong, they don't have the ability or the capabilities within their nature to forgive someone or let them have a free pass, as you will, through what they have done. Instead, they enforce very strict religious punishments on these people who don't fit their society.
Thank you guys so much for coming today. It was really a big help.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks for having us.
We'll see you later. Caroline, come downstairs for breakfast, sweetie. You fell asleep last night writing your essay.
Mom, I have to finish this essay.
I don't care, Caroline. Eggs and bacon are more important than Nathaniel Hawthorne.
What is a Honey Nut Cheerio?
Oh, wait, you guys are back?
Yeah,
I have so many more questions to ask you.
go for it.
Okay. So Hawthorne and Fitzgerald, what are some specific examples of cultural context in your books?
Well, in Great Gatsby, some cultural context examples can be seen in so the setting of the parties that Gatsby throws. These lavish parties are a great example of the wealth and prominence shown in the West and East Eggs during that time, especially in the Roaring Twenties when everyone was trying to get rich, especially in America and in that area.
Well, you see, the difference for me was that in my setting, I really try to incorporate the Puritan society in that cultural context because of how much that accompanies that. You know, that now historians study, and despite how it wasn't in my time period, I still felt like it was really important to understanding the book. Also, I included how the division of religion influenced the government structure of this time because the men who were the priests of the society tended to be higher ranking officials. And you could see this in when Hester is interacting with many of the other characters in the story. The ones that tend to judge her the most are the highest ranking priests.
So how do your societal views influence the personal views of your characters?
I think a good example of this, my societal views in The Great Gatsby can be seen with Nick. When I was a writer, I didn't have much money. I was trying to make it. Nick goes into this new lifestyle like I slowly did as fame came to me, and he's an outsider looking in on this more wealthy world, this totally different lifestyle with all the lavish parties and material things. Slowly I realized that wealth corrupted people, and Nick goes through a journey throughout Great Gatsby as he eventually learns that wealth corrupts people and he knows that he needs to get away from this lifestyle.
I did the same thing in my book where I wrote two different sides of the story. On one side, I wrote Hester, who is a lot like myself in ways such as I did not believe in the Puritan views of my ancestors, and I became an anti-transcendentalist. So I, in a way, showed my views and ideals through Hester, who also disobeyed the laws and restrictions of the Puritan society. On the other hand, on the contrary, I wrote about Dimmesdale, who was a very strict follower of the Puritan society, besides his one instance of his sin committed with Hester, adultery. And by using contrasting characters, I'm able to add depth to my book and add more conflict, rather than if everyone was to one side, things would be much different.
So in your opinions, how did the allusions from the cultural period add depth to the setting in which the characters live?
Well, in my book, The Great Gatsby, I use the illusion of the Roaring Twenties throughout the whole book to show how the characters are affected by the deep social divisions. I use East Egg, West Egg, the Valley of Ashes, like you mentioned earlier, to show how wealth is such a strong factor in showing how these people are divided socially and how they're treated so much differently. In Wilson's garage, you can see the difference between his garage and his house and Gatsby's house versus Tom's house. And all of these things kind of represent their personalities as well. This adds great depth to my characters as well as my storyline. It gets the reader more involved. It's very, very helpful.
So what do you think, Hawthorne?
In order to enhance my plot, I use allusions such as to the Salem witch trials or to the Puritan religion. A few reasons why I did this. One of those being it added depth to my book. Another being it added more historical backing to why my characters would act in the ways they did. For example, because of all the Salem witch trials, and my readers knowing this before reading my book, they knew how strict the Puritan society was and what the punishment would be if Hester were convicted for committing adultery. So when we find out that she just has to stand on a scaffold for a while and wear a scarlet letter, it's not as big of a punishment as we would think it would have been. And it shows that a new movement is coming up or surfacing in the Puritan society, or things are changing. And because of this, it adds depth to my characters because now the characters such as Hester and Pearl seem to be the ones who are changing the society single-handedly.
So there's a quote in chapter 18 that you say, "But Hester Prynne, with a mind of native courage and activity, and for so long a period not merely estranged, but outlawed from the society." So you said as before that the priests had judged her and she was very much so looked down upon for her sin that she committed, but she also did try to take her daughter away from the society, and Pearl ends up at the end of the book moving away from the corrupt Puritan religion.
Exactly.
Okay, so my last question is, how did the setting shape the characters as static or dynamic?
Well, in my book, The Great Gatsby, Gatsby himself stays incredibly static throughout the whole book. We can see this as the Roaring Twenties goes on, wealth and money is still a desire of most people. Gatsby keeps consistently wanting hope. He never gives up. He's always still he starts off at the end of the dock, looking off into that green light. He ends there. He stays in his mansion. He dies in his mansion. Gatsby never really changes throughout the book. However, Nick, on the other hand, he adapts to the setting that I put the characters in. The Roaring Twenties goes on. Nick is able to observe and adapt. He slowly progresses. He sees what the wealth is doing to these people. He sees the corruption that I saw. Eventually, Nick decides that it's time to go, and he has no more of it.
So differently as how your book went, where Gatsby stayed the same mostly throughout the course. Hester, in my book, I wrote as a character of extreme change. So the primary example is how she adapts to the Scarlet Letter. At first, when this Scarlet Letter is bestowed upon her, and it is her punishment to wear it, she hides and cowers from the townspeople because it means adultery. And she does not take this well and doesn't appear to change at all in the beginning of the book, and just continues to hide her fears, only comes out at night. And then towards the end of the book, she becomes a woman who helps the needy, helps the poor. She sews things for people, and the A changes its meaning to able. And this shows how she was a dynamic character who changed throughout the course of the book. And I used setting to change this by showing whichever places Hester went. Most of the time where she was cowarding, she was in the town where the people that criticized her dwelled as well. When she changed, she was in the forest with Pearl, and Pearl would bring up deeper meaning questions or thoughts to her mother. And this is how I personified the forest as a setting that changed Hester as well as her character in my book.
So Fitzgerald, you talk about how Nick Carraway is this like observer of the wealth and greed that goes along in the 1920s. And so also the Valley of Ashes is part of this because it's where the valley between where the rich and poor are separated, and the people in the Valley of Ashes are working class and don't make it to that American dream, and it shows their impoverished lives. And so this is shown through kind of like your views and your different observations of this time period. And then Hawthorne, with you and Hester, you make her a character that does go outside of the traditional societal views in the Puritan religion. And in a quote in chapter 18, they talk about how Hester is a mind of native courage and activity, and for so long a period not merely estranged but outlawed from society. So she kind of is outlawed but also takes on these views and raises her daughter Pearl to grow up outside of this corrupt society, and then Pearl ends up moving away at the end of the book.
Good.
Oh, I understand now. Okay, so in The Great Gatsby and The Scarlet Letter, they both use the settings and to develop the characters and show this through the different time periods. And I see that, with Nick and Gatsby when they're talking, and Gatsby always wants to bring back this idea of the past and rekindling his love with Daisy. He can never give up this motif of hope. And Hawthorne uses the setting from the forest to the Puritan village to show the differences and how Hester changes over time as a character.
Caroline, wake up. It's time to go to school. I know you're really tired from typing your essay, but let's go. Get in the car.
Oh, I don't have time I have to finish this essay. I'm so glad you guys are back again because I have a few other questions. So, how do your lenses affect the reader's point of view?
Well, you see, my lens affected the book in a major way. Since I grew up in the Roaring Twenties, got a negative connotation from all the greed and the mass obsession with wealth. So with my character Nick Carraway, I showed that in him with a very negative connotation of how everyone was portrayed in the West and East Egg, and eventually Nick kind of disbands all of it and tries to get out of there.
Yeah, and the same thing goes for me. A lot of what I wrote about came from my ancestry and how they were connected with the Salem witch trials in the Puritan Society. And I definitely conveyed this through a lot of ways in my book, through my themes and my settings. And it really just affected the reader's point of view because they were able to see into what I was writing and why I was writing it.
Okay, great. So what about this? So how does the symbolism, such as the green light and the scarlet A, reveal the truth about the time periods you two come from?
I symbolize the light as a sign of hope in that one last piece, which is Daisy, that Gatsby needs to will into his American dream. It symbolizes the unattainable false hope that I and other people during this time period experienced through the process of completing this society idea.
And for me, I use the red A to symbolize how society has placed this blood stain or like a stab mark on Hester, and she can never separate herself from it. And this is just it stays with her throughout the whole book, so it doesn't let readers forget how strict the Puritan society is.
How are individuality and conformity both displayed in the books?
In my book, conformity is shown through the social trend of achieving the American dream. And in my own life, I conformed to this idea, but realized it came to sacrifice my false hope for some time. I can also show you the social conformity in my book through how women were treated with, for example, Daisy. Daisy several times hates Tom, yet she doesn't feel like it's her right to divorce him and leave him. This is a social thing in the time period, and can also be seen when Gatsby strives for wealth just to please Daisy, or when Tom is clearly having an affair with Myrtle, but no one is doing anything about it.
And same ways that you showed conformity in yours, I showed the opposite, where Hester, as the main character, is doing everything she can to break free from the Puritan society. And there are also examples of conformity where she debates with herself an inner conflict of whether she should adapt the Puritan ways. But in the end, although she does go back to the Puritan society, she has dynamically changed throughout the book and showed how much of an unconformist she is. Yeah.
Okay, so I think I got this. So in both of your books, the strict cultural ideas of the time period, such as the Roaring Twenties and the American Dream, and the Puritan Society, demonstrates how you shaped the characters' actions and beliefs in both books. Oh my gosh, I have 10 minutes before class starts. Finish this essay. Okay. I've learned so much from my good buds, Hawthorne and Fitzgerald. Gotta go to school now. And I'm still in my pajamas.